presentation for Mr. Harris Rosen, whose hotels we are in. Interestingly enough, Mr. Rosen is a ROTC, did ROTC at Cornell and served in the United States Army from 61 to 64 in Korea and Germany. So he's actually one of us, as a Vietnam era veteran. Basic training at Fort Bragg, jumps every year on his birthday with the Golden Knights. He won a Quality Inn in 1974 while working as director of hotel planning for Disney. He now owns Rosen Hotels Resorts and employs more than 3,000 people with 5,000 rooms. We don't often do enough acknowledging Vietnam veterans who actually had these kinds of accomplishments in business and in the outside real world. And it really is a pleasure and a privilege for me to present an Achievement Medal on behalf of VVA to Mr. Harris Rosen, owner of Rosen Hotels. I think I can speak for everyone. We've had a wonderful time in Harris in the last few days. It's been really a great pleasure. And even yesterday we had a little incident with one of our brothers who unfortunately was indulging too much and his sugar got too high and he had a hole in the EMTs. But I must also say, while we called 911 and obviously got the EMTs to come in from the local fire department, his staff here did respond quite quickly and ready to assist if necessary. So it was quite nice. So I'd like to present to Mr. Rosen this little certificate here and an achievement medal. Thank you so much.
I hadn't been back to Fort Bragg in a while. And things have really changed dramatically. I remember the barracks and I remember the mess hall in particular. And they have all disappeared. There are condos and single-family residences, which I think is wonderful. And there are beautiful little cafeterias serving healthy foods, which is also wonderful. People actually serving in this fun. But I was asked to say a few words about leadership, and I will. I have about 10 to 15 minutes to do that, which strikes me as a little bit of a challenge because West Point and Annapolis and Air Force Academy spent 4 years doing it. But I'll try to share from a personal perspective what I think leadership is all about. But first I need to ask you a question. I'm originally from New York City, born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, between the two bridges, the Manhattan and Brooklyn Bridge, and between the Fulton Fish Market and the Bowery. A neighborhood referred to back then as Hell's Kitchen, not a gated community. Not a gated community. And one actually begins to learn some leadership skills in a neighborhood environment like that. But we had a crazy mayor back then, and he would walk the streets, and he would ask questions of passers-by. And the question he would ask was, how am I doing? You can imagine, those of you who are from New York, who heard about us New Yorkers, what kind of answers he got. Sometimes expressed in very colorful language. But I'm going to ask you that question. You've been with us for a number of days now. We've got a beautiful banquet scheduled for tonight. How are we doing so far? Our little company started in 1974. Disney. And I will tell you, with some embarrassment, that I left involuntarily. I started with Disney in California in the late 60s and came here to open Disney World in '71. I was director of planning for the hotel division, and I had convinced myself that I had really done a superb job. But I didn't get any increases in my salary. It was somewhat disappointing to me. And one day after we opened in October of '71, I think it was November, December, my boss's boss called me in for a conference, and I was elated. I was convinced that I was going to get a well-deserved increase in pay. But you ever open a door and walk into a room and get some vibrations like maybe? But I kind of set those aside and sat down eagerly to await really happy news. But Mr. Allen said to me right off the bat, Harris, you've done a nice job for us. But, and the word but kind of sealed my fate. But it has become apparent to us, after being with us for 4 years, that you will never become a Disney person. Well, every once in a while, I must confess that I revert back to my roots. And I asked a question that sealed my fate. The question was, I repeated what he said. Mr. Allen, you're telling me that I will never become a Disney person. Yes. And I asked him, was it because my ears were too small? And he said, that's the kind of BS we're talking about. I promised myself as I walked out of the office and walked away from the Magic Kingdom that I would never work for anybody else again. Even if I had to sell hot dogs in downtown. But it didn't come to that because this was in the early 70s. There was an oil embargo. Tourism in Orlando was just awful. And virtually every hotel was having financial difficulties. Some were in bankruptcy, some were foreclosure, some were just hanging on by a thread. And I did purchase my first hotel in 1974, June 24th, for $20,000. All the money I had. I hitchhiked to New England because I knew that's where all the motor coach companies were, or most of them. And I knew that they were still bringing people to Florida because it was much more economical to have 40 people on a vehicle than it was to have 40 vehicles driving. And I hitchhiked up there because I didn't have enough money to travel. And I came back. I gave each one of the people I met a little business card, and I asked them what rate they thought was a fair rate to charge them per night in our little hotel. And the rates, I kept these cards, the rates that they quoted ranged from $7.25 to $8.75 per night. They would write the rate, I would put OK HR, that was the contract. I would go back to Orlando, I promised, and send them a formal contract. I booked enough business on that trip to see us through some of the difficult months ahead. And then, of course, the embargo was lifted, and And today we've grown from 256 rooms to 6,005. Now, along the way, I learned something about leadership. Although I must confess that at Fort Bragg, I learned some leadership skills, and I certainly did serving as a young officer and career manager. But now, I had the responsibility of all of the people who worked for me. And I had to make absolutely sure that as a young company, we were able to survive. And so I did what came kind of naturally. I set about to demonstrate to the people who worked for me the standards that I thought were appropriate. In order to save money and to demonstrate that hard work was something I was certainly not allergic to, I was the general manager of the hotel. I was the sales manager of the hotel. I was the food and beverage manager of the hotel. I was the assistant breakfast cook, and I did all the meat carving at night. I was a night runner. That is, if someone had a stopped toilet, it was my number they called, and I would go to their room and touch it. I was a security guard. I had one person on my staff. His name was Rintintin. Best security officer I ever had. I did all the gardening. Anything that had to be done around the hotel, I became the handyman, chief of maintenance. I had about 8 jobs, and I saved about $225,000 a year by doing all the work myself. And people saw me doing the gardening when it was weather like this now. And they knew I was getting called at night to help people that needed help. They saw me handling luggage and helping people in their rooms. They knew that hard work was something that they could be proud of. I lived in the hotel for 16 years. And it's funny because I always wanted to get married and have a family. I met a young woman and fell in love. I could not really understand, well, I knew nothing about marriage, but I could not really understand why when I suggested she just move into my little apartment at the hotel, she wasn't sure about that. I suggested, I got a response, and I moved out. Today, I'm a proud dad of 4 children. I have a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And I try to keep myself busy at work as long as I can. Oh, my dear God. I thought it was rough when they were 4, 3, 2, and a baby, but dear God in the heavens. It happens to a young lady when she goes from 13 to 14. She morphed into a stranger. I don't know who, my little shaker. She was daddy's little girl, and now she's a stranger. 2 of my boys are at the Rosen College, part of the University of Central Florida. We built a college, we donated the land. It's a beautiful college. I don't know if you've seen it. It's near Shingle Creek on University Boulevard. We started with 100 students for 3,000. Fastest growing college in the United States. Leadership. Know the subject. Know the subject. Difficult to lead someone if you don't know much about what it is that you're leading. Know your subject. I've learned my subject well. Set a good example. Set a good example. You know, the follow me philosophy that we were taught at fourth grade. It's important. People know that the boss is not immune to heartburn. That the boss has done it before. That the boss is capable of doing it for you. But let me share with you now something that tragically in today's world, not too many leaders, not enough leaders really focus on. Dear God, we've seen what happened to AIG, Bear Stearns, Tyco, Oilcom, Enron, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. What's wrong with us as a country today? Where's the leadership? Where's the leadership? And so we have created a concept here in our little organization, which we refer to as responsible leadership. Yes. We have an obligation not only to know what we're doing, not only to incentivize people, not only to make sure that the work is getting done, to make sure that the quality of service is absolutely first rate, but to make sure as a company, we're always doing the right thing. It's not very difficult. That's not very difficult. And how do we express that culture? Well, we adopted a neighborhood referred to as Tangible Park, a very poor neighborhood where drugs and prostitution were rampant. We did that 18 years ago. Every 2, 3, and 4-year-old in the neighborhood goes to a preschool that we created. We have 10 little preschools in the neighborhood. It's free to the parents. It's a wonderful preschool education. We mentor those youngsters. We lead those youngsters through kindergarten and elementary school, middle school and high school, create an incentive and hope so that they go on and do well in high school, and then if they're accepted to vocational school or college, we pay for everything, their room and board, tuition, travel, books, everything. The whole enchilada. We have sent 325 youngsters to college where previously only about 20 to 25% of those youngsters graduated from high school. In 7 years, we've averaged 99.6% graduation from high school, and 70% who graduate from high school go on and graduate from college. That's leadership. We're letting our associates know that we care about our community. We're letting the community know that we care about them. The good Lord has blessed us beyond anything we ever imagined. From the Lower East Side of Manhattan to the National Drive, we have been blessed, and so we give back. We just built a community center, a beautiful new community center. And what pleased me so, I went for our first anniversary yesterday. The diversity in this facility was just amazing. Ladies with burgers, children with the Star of David, children with the Blue Crosses, all getting along so wonderfully in this beautiful facility. Leadership, giving back to our community. It doesn't have to be in the United States necessarily, although I think charity does start at home. We adopted Haiti. About a third of our associates are from Haiti. We've been to Haiti a dozen times with healthcare supplies, with food supplies, educational supplies, 220 water filtration systems that can provide fresh, clean drinking water for over 150,000 people. We installed them ourselves. And today, we've created a little Haiti house for under $5,000, built here in the United States, assembled in Haiti by Haitians, Our goal is to give away 5,000 of these homes. We're looking for land now to build our first village. Will be called the Little 80 House Village. We'll have fish ponds, fish farms. We'll have chickens, goats, and pigs. We'll have mangoes and papayas and sugar. We'll have little villages, not unlike the kibbutz in Israel. And that's our dream, to do that. Why are we doing this? It's all about leadership. It's part of us saying, thank you, God. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, United States of America. Thank you for the opportunities. And now it's time for us to give back. And that's what we're doing. So that's my little message on leadership. Thank you all. God bless you all. Thank you all for your service. And I hope you have a great banquet tonight.
We knew we were honoring a man of achievement in business, but we didn't know we were honoring a major philanthropist. What an honor. What a shock, we got a Jewish guy moving to Florida from New York. All my brothers from Queens coming down here, it's great fun.